Gemar Chasima Tova, everyone. My name is Yaakov Glasser, and on behalf of the Orthodox Union, it is my esteemed pleasure to welcome you to today's program. Over the last number of weeks, the Orthodox Union has been sharing insights, reflections, inspiration related to tefillah through the program Bihi Matzo. The notion that the period of the year that we find ourselves in at this time is a period of time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that God is more easily discovered and experienced. It's a period of time that we are more attuned to our own inner spiritual selves as we strive to navigate the many, many opportunities that we have for connection and for meaning over the course of these weeks of the Yamim Tovim, from Elul through Tishrei. And over the course of this past period of time, the Orthodox Union has published a number of different shiurim, of insights, of various forms of guidance from rabbinic leaders across North America. And you may have noticed in many of our communities locally, many Rabbanim have taken it upon themselves to focus the community more on advancing our connection to the world of tefillah. We have with us today an incredible and illustrious group of rabbinic leaders. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Rabbi Yisrael Matzin and Rabbi Moshe Brandsdorfer for all of their incredibly hard work in pulling this program together. And with us this afternoon on this Tzom Gedalia, and we welcome all of you who've come together with us to grow in our quest for strengthening our tefillah this afternoon. We welcome Rabbi Moshe Hauer. Rabbi Hauer is, of course, the Executive Vice President of the Orthodox Union. Rav Moshe Weinberger, the Rav of Eish Kodesh. Rabbi Efrem Goldberg, the Rabbi of the Boca Raton Synagogue. All of our illustrious panelists are Rabbanim and communal leaders whose influence extend far beyond the local institutions that they lead. And much of the reason for this is because of their incredible capacity to speak from the heart and to the heart. And so therefore, we are incredibly excited, inspired, and elevated by the opportunity to be able to bring together, in particular, this group to try to reflect on aspects of tefillah as we work ourselves to grow in our connection to tefillah. As we know, tefillah is central not only to our religious lives as certainly one of the core elements of the expression of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's also a context in the rhythm of our religious life. It brings us together as a community. It brings us together as families. It connects us to a central world. And that's why, in particular this year, with the configuration of our calendar, where we encounter so many moments that we are sharing together over the course of these weeks of Tishrei in Shul, it is of particular significance for us to gather and discuss and reflect areas of tefillah. I want to begin our discussion today with a little bit of a personal reflection. I grew up in the home of a chazan, and my father, who for decades leads the tzibur in the Yamim Noraim tefillos, would always begin the season of Yamim Noraim actually in a very unpredictable space. And that is the final hour of Tisha B'Av in our home. My father would always recite Ne'ilah, and he would tell us all, test conditions. And from that final hour of Tisha B'Av, each and every Friday night, as a kid, I would fall asleep to the nuschos of the Yamim Noraim. And they became part of my consciousness, part of who I was. And so as I grew older and began to appreciate the tefillos themselves, so much of the emotionality of the experience came from my own origins in relating to the world of Yamim Noraim. When we approach shul, when we approach davening, we carry with us not only whatever we can understand and comprehend, we carry with us a certain experiential dimension, certain emotional attachment to these days, which makes them high stakes. It makes them days that we are trying very hard to connect in a meaningful way. And when it happens, we feel such a sense of achievement and success and a sense of meaning. And when we feel like there's a barrier, there's such a deep frustration and there's such a consternation. at being unable to kind of pull together what we know is out there in the atmosphere, in the spiritual atmosphere, as an incredible opportunity for us to be able to connect to the Ribono Shel Olam. And so we'd like to begin our discussion this afternoon with the following question. And that is that the tefillos that we just recited of Rosh Hashanah, the tefillos of Yom Kippur, which we're going to recite soon, are saturated with many, many themes. We had Malchios, Sichronos, Shofros. On Yom Kippur, we're going to focus on the Avoda that took place in the Beis Hamikdash. We're going to focus on the Asara Harugei Malchus. There are so many piyutim, there are so many elements to the tefillah that project so many different themes connected and related to our Avodas Hashem. But as we enter this zone of tefillah, we're also bringing with ourselves the totality of our own human experience. We have so much that we want to ask for that takes place not in the upper worlds of what's going on in the Beis Hamikdash, but takes place in our own homes, in our own schools, in our own communities, in our own lives, in our marriages, in our families, and all the different aspects of life that we are struggling with. So what I'd like to open with in our discussion is if we could ask our illustrious Rabbanim to reflect for a moment, how do we balance that? When we open the machzor, where is the space? And I don't just mean specifically where do we ask for things, but how do we embrace this experience at once connecting to the themes that are ever present in the machzor and the davening itself, and at the same time, personalizing this experience so we feel like we are actually bringing ourselves and our lives and everything we're looking for in the authenticity of this connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu in these very central moments of the Jewish calendar. So we'd like to begin with Rav Weinberger. B'chavod.
First of all, thank you so much, Rabbi Glasser, Rabbi Yaakov, and I want to thank the OU, the Orthodox Union, and we're friends. All of us are friends, Baruch Hashem. I think that's a much greater title that we have, that we share amongst each other, that we're friends. And it's wonderful to be together, and we should all be together with the entire Chevra, whoever is part of this, to be together in Yerushalayim and Mitzvah Hashem. I would just begin with the following. I think I'll begin with the end. The Chasima, the end is Ne'ilah. Everything that we're doing during this time is to reach that point of the ending. And the end is, in the davening of Ne'ilah, we say, Ata hivdalta enosh mirosh, v'atakirei olam lefanecha. That means that man was set aside from the beginning to be able to stand in front of Hashem, to be able to face Hashem. In our davening yesterday, in the Nisan HaTokef, we were saying, Kol boya olam ovim lefanav kivnei maron. And therefore, it's very, very easy for the individual to lose himself in the monumental, universal picture of the tefillahs and the machzor, to lose the tachlis of all of these tefillahs and all of these days, which is v'takirehu la'amod lefanecha, to be able to finally look at Hashem in the eyes after a year of sort of looking aside a little bit and being distracted and sometimes forgetting who we are and getting lost in the crowd. Finally, there's that time of kol by olam, ovrin lefanav kivnei maron, whichever one of the three pshatim in the Gemara one prefers, it all means the same. It means facing Hashem, it means panim el panim. Therefore, in response to the question, Rabbi Yaakov, the machzor has gotten very big over the years. It's grown very large over the years. That's not how davening started originally. And it's picked up a lot over the years for many reasons. The Ashkenazi machzor is much larger than the Sephardic one. Our piyutim are much more. And there's a lot that we don't say that's printed in the machzor. It was probably printed just to make us have some feeling of relief that we don't say those things. But the machzor has gotten very, very, very large. And when it comes to all of davening, the point, let's say, of Malchias is always to reflect upon, in the Malchias, to reflect upon what is my particular role in this Malchus of Hashem. this past year, that I fulfill my role as a faithful servant in that Malchus of Hashem. In Zechronis, how did I remember Hashem? How is Hashem part of that memory of my point in this world, my existence in this world? Did I bring that memory closer to the hearts of my wife, of my children, those who are to have that family setting, or my friends, to my students, shayfas? To what degree did I make that presence of Anochi Hashem Lakecha, the shayfa of Har Sinai, that clarity of Hashem's presence? To what degree did I make that a part of my life, and my family's life, and my students' life, and my chevra? One has to work very hard to personalize one's tefillahs. One of the essential teachings of the tzaddikim, and particularly Rabbi Nachman, was that one has to take the Torah and to make it into tefillah. That means that whatever we learn, we have to try to transform that into tefillah. And there's no question that we've learned many things over the year, and we have to try somehow in the course of our davening to try to look at what we're davening in the context of what we've learned and how we understand ourselves and how we understand Yiddishkeit, our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to make it into something which is as personal as possible. Sof Kol Sof, tefillah is chayesha, and chayesha means that Hashem wants us to express what we're going through at this time in my life, not just to say, like whenever we're saying Tehillim. David Melech was saying Tehillim, but we have to see ourselves in Tehillim. How do I fit into the machzor? Where am I in the Sanatoikev? Where am I? It's not, we shouldn't look at these as things that were said thousands of years ago, but who am I in these tefillahs? Where do I fit into these tefillahs, and to make them as personal as possible?
Thank you so much, Rabbi Efrem.
First of all, I too am humbled to be here. Thank you to the OU for organizing, and to be with a Rebbe and a mentor of Weinberger, Rabbi Hauer. Thank you so much for this honor. And I'll just make tefillah very personal for a moment. I know it's on all of our hearts and minds, and all of our thoughts are the residents of Florida, particularly the West Coast right now, who are being pummeled as we meet, and really in enormous harm's way. In general, of course, all of the residents of Florida, but the Jewish communities in particular, we know, so they're very much in our tefillos, and we daven for their safety and for their well-being. We know that OU will be there to help them, as well, all of us afterwards. To me, I think we overcomplicate things. As Rebbe was just saying, as Rabbi Weinberger was saying, the machzor is long and it's intricate and its Hebrew is complicated, and we sometimes think of tefillah as, I've just got to get through it. I've just got to say it as quickly as possible. I want to discharge it as painlessly as possible. I want to turn those pages as fast as possible. When I get to the end, I'm done, and I can exhale, and it's a relief, and it's finished. And we fail to realize that the machzor, or the siddur for that matter, because it's not a yamim noraim issue, it's a davening everyday issue. It's a template, and we're supposed to fill in the gaps by making it personal. We're supposed to use the template to be able to organize our thoughts and to obligate us, even if we're not in the mood, and to ensure that we show up and we say something, even when we don't feel like it. But the highest level of tefillah is not what's printed in any book. Highest level of tefillah is what's printed in our heart. And I often like to think of it that if you never talk to Hashem outside of the siddur or machzor, you're going to struggle to speak to him inside of it. If you're not involved in a lifelong conversation, speaking to him, unburdening to him, leaning on him, protesting to him, thanking him, if he's not part of your ongoing conversation throughout your day and throughout your life, how could you expect when you open the machzor a bunch of words that so many are unfamiliar with? And I'll be honest here, in a way that I'm not ashamed. There are parts of the davening that I look at in the English. There are piyutim that are so complicated, or that are making such assumptions about our working knowledge of Tanakh and Chazal that I don't have, whether it's piyutim or whether it's the slichos. Just this morning, there were a few times I looked over in the English, and I said it in the English, because the goal is to be moved. The goal is to be connected. The goal is to come closer. The goal is not to finish. So I think we need to work harder and do better in seeing it in the context of a relationship, of a conversation, that these words are a template for us to be able to fill in those gaps with very, very personal things, with very real things, with a real sense that this isn't something I'm trying to complete or finish, but it's a privilege and an opportunity. It's an audience. It's an audience. I'm sure everybody saw, the memes that were going around of the people who waited online 10 hours to spend 5 minutes with a dead queen. We stood there for 6 hours to have the privilege to talk to a living king. And that's not just a cute meme or a saying someone came up with a quip after the queen passed away. It's emes, it's truth to it. We have an audience with the King of Kings. We could pour out our heart. We have so many things to be grateful for we shouldn't take for granted, and so many things we rely on, we depend on. I look at my life and the life of the people I care so deeply about in our community, and I think of how many people's lives have radically changed since last Rosh Hashanah in ways that they would have never even imagined or dreamt, things that they didn't even know they would have to daven for. They would, if you would have tapped them on the shoulder and said, don't forget to daven for this, for you, for your child, for the community, never would have dreamt. So it's real, it's real. And the davening should reflect that reality of how real we feel it is and how much we are privileged to be in an audience with the King of Kings and the opportunity to speak to him and to talk to him. And there's a lot more to say about this. I'm sure we'll go on in the conversation, but I'll leave it with Chazal understood that when they told us, don't let our davening ever become keva or kfar. It has to be tachanunim. Don't let it be fixed. Don't let it be limited to the words on the page. Let it be real and fluid. Let it reflect a dynamic and an animated personality and a life and a lifestyle and the things that are going on in our lives. And if we're conscious of that as we daven, that we're not just figuring out words on a page. And Rosh Hashanah, the Shemona Esrei, it's almost as if we forget every year that the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah is the longest Amidah of the year, longer than we think we're building up to Yom Kippur. To Ne'ilah, that Shemona Esrei, it's an Iron Man. It's an Iron Man of davening. Like you got to get through Malchia, Shofar, Zechron. It's an Iron Man you got to get through. And we're so focused on the words and the psukim, did I get it right? Which tune, who was the singer, which album did I hear that on? That we forget that this is all a template and a platform. Talk to him. What's in your heart? Don't fly through it. Pause and meditate and reflect and let a particular phrase, let it enter you and enjoy it. Add your own words to that conversation. Interrupt. Take some deep breaths. Relax your shoulders. Be there. We're in such a rush that simply some of these small reminders, and I think it's even the permission. It's the permission to slow down, permission to take a breath, permission to read the English, permission to insert something personal. All those things that we've been trained that we don't have permission for. If only we realize that not only do we have permission, but that's the ideal, that's the most authentic, I think it could have enormous impact on transforming our tefillah.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Goldberg. Rav Hauer.
Thank you. It's a schus to be together with you all, and in such an important discussion. Perhaps if I can add something to what has already been said so importantly and so strongly, is to explore perhaps a little bit of the tension which we all experience in a very pronounced way on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. But it's really there all the time. So, the siddur started off smaller. The siddur, tefillah started off without a siddur. And we just had this general idea of Shevach, Bakasha, Haidah. We're supposed to acknowledge HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then ask him, and then thank him. When Chazal wrote the siddur, they wrote Kol Tzorchei Bnei Adam, everything that people would need, and everything that people should need. To a degree, of course, significantly, we have those spaces in davening to express ourselves so that we are there, as has been said by Rav Weinberger, by Rav Goldberg. It's critical that we connect that way. But in a certain sense, as we all experience in a profound way on Rosh Hashanah, when we come to daven, and we know that we know that it's every aspect of our lives is on the line, and we also know, with the little bit of knowledge that we have, that the fact that we even say that Nesana Taikef Miyichil Miyamus is sort of, we could say it or we could not say it. It's not essential to the tefillah; it's a piyut, and the davening itself is about big things. It's not about Zachreinu L'chaim is dispensable from the Shemona Esrei, but Malchios, Maloch HaKolam Kula B'chvadecha is not. And what Chazal did was, they said, tefillah is supposed to fill your heart. The Maral says it with Ra'ai Panecha Loi Pilolti, that Yaakov Avinu said Loi Mila Ani Libi. Now, the lashon of tefillah is the desire that fills your heart, and to some degree, Chazal wanted us to grow our hearts a little bit beyond the immediate needs which we feel, with which we would readily and comfortably come to the Ribono Shel Olam who can provide it, and they wanted us to expand and to think a little bit bigger beyond ourselves. And at the same time, heaven forbid, not to deprive the person of also speaking to the Ribono Shel Olam exactly where we are. You know, we focus on it a lot on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur because there's it seems almost such a disconnect between the core of the tefillah and what we know is going on, you know, with the decisions in Shemayim. But in a certain sense, it's there in every davening. I'm not going to conduct this survey with the people on this call, but I have conducted this survey with many groups and asked them, okay, so your weekday Shemona Esrei, which brachas get the most attention? Invariably, there are 3 brachas that answer that. And it's not the first bracha because that has a requirement of kavanah. There's Rifa'enu, because people have cholim, lo aleinu, rachmana litzlan, people who need a recovery, they have them in mind. Baruch aleinu, because everyone needs to make a parnasa. And Shema Koleinu, because there you could, you know, the child who's struggling, the shidduch that's needed, whatever it is, the job that you're looking for, if you didn't cover in Baruch Aleinu, you're going to come back to it in Shema Koleinu. Shema Koleinu is the catch-all where you can put anything in. And it's a tiny fraction of even the bakoshos of Shemona Esrei. The requests which Chazal wrote for us were extremely lofty. We're supposed to be asking for wisdom. We're supposed to be asking for tshuva. We're supposed to be asking for Hashem to be restored to Yerushalayim and for David HaMelech's crown and for justice to be restored to the world. But we zero in on the basic because we're people and we need to speak to the Ribono Shel Olam where we are. And Chazal said that we want to stretch you and we want to expand you and we want to make you bigger. And we want you to be concerned and caring about these things. And of course, there's going to be a tension in there for life because gravity has us with our basic needs. And at the same time, you know, there's the reverse gravity that Chazal tried to help us to lift ourselves up. And that's something which is inherent to our tefillas. It's inherent to the tefillah experience. We need to ask where we are. And at the same time, to some degree, there's a goal of trying to elevate where we are, trying to broaden our vision, trying to make ourselves bigger. And both happen simultaneously, and somehow we need to straddle it. I'd love to hear how the other Rabbanim feel about this. You know, there's some specific, thoughts, eitzos each one of us might have from our own experience as to how we manage that tension. But I think that's a core to how we approach the Siddur.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Hauer. Rabbi Weinberger, did you want to respond or?
No, let's continue.
Okay.
Beautiful.
I thought I saw. So in terms of all of us walking to shul, it's Yom Noraim or some other time in shul, and the reality is that we carry with us, as we walk into shul, multiple identities. The piece of us that davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eved Hashem in us, is one identity. But we carry multiple identities. Some of us are zocha to be fathers. Some of us are zocha to be mothers. Some of us, have parents that are around. And so often the shul experience involves multiple roles. Certainly as Rabbanim, when we are in shul and trying so hard to connect with tefillah for ourselves and our own families, we also have very much on our minds not just our kehilos in the realm of tefillah, which is also important and wonderful, but also some of the practical issues that are unfolding that often characterize the rhythms of the davening in a shul. So we're sitting in shul and we have multiple identities. We have multiple roles. And for many that are blessed for such a role, one of those roles is the role of a parent, the role of a father or a mother. And we're sitting next to our children and we are trying to inspire them to connect to tefillah. And it's been well established in many of our schools and in many of our shuls that tefillah is something that each generation struggles with in its own way. And certainly the younger generation, our children and grandchildren, are certainly struggling with it in a unique way that is relative to the reality and the generation that they're growing up in. So we're sitting with them in shul, and we're trying to not only daven ourselves, but we're playing the role of mechanech or mechanechas. We're also trying to help them connect to davening. So if our Rabbanim could reflect on some guidance that you could provide for how we should, both on a practical level, how much of shul we should be encouraging our children to be present for, and obviously we're dealing with a wide range of ages, how much of shul they should be present for, and how they can connect. How can we share with them to connect to davening when their overall appreciation for life may not have the same nuance, the same life experience, the same sophistication that perhaps we do when we encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this context of tefillah. Some guidance in how we could help our children. It's a lot of shul, it's a lot of davening, it's a lot of sitting. What could we share with them, and what could we be doing in shul to make this a more meaningful experience for our children? Rabbi Goldberg, you want to start us off?
I'll take a shot at it. I mean, I think, for me, maybe for all of us, we're still trying to figure that out. To state the obvious, the best thing that we could do for our children is be the best role model for our children. The biggest platform for teaching them is by their seeing somebody who's genuinely and in earnest pouring out their heart. We're engaged in the avoda shebalev, which is an avoda. We want davening to come easy. We think it should come easy, but it's called avoda shebalev. It's work. It takes work. Almost anything worthwhile in life takes work. Our children know that when they see us working for a living or a livelihood, or working out with a trainer or on the Peloton, or working for whatever other achievement or accomplishment in life, it takes work. The question is, do they see us working on this too, both in shul and out of it? Are we working on it? Right? Kol hakavod to those who are tuning in. It's a community of people working on it. And the OU, the glass for running the Himatzo, a whole ability for people to be working on it. Not just I daven, I'm done, good, Baruch Hashem for the day till I have to go to Mincha. But do they see us working on it? Not only in shul, but outside of shul, but what is their perception? We have in our own mind, you shared by Glasser very beautifully, your father's singing, echoing still in your ears. What do our children, when they are recalling, when they have nostalgia for the Yom Noraim of their youth, what will they remember they're seeing with us? What time did we get to shul? What was our davening like in shul? Did we bring a library of books to distract us from davening? When I was a kid, at least the books used to be like Jewish themed book and Jewish authors. They were Svarim. Now you can see people will bring in all kinds of books, just whatever they could do to have to, like it's root canal, to anesthetize themselves, to get through it until they get to the end. So again, I'm not even being critical. For some people, it's very difficult, it's very painful, but what image are we painting? What is the indelible impression that we're leaving? What are the memories that we're searing into our children when they grow old and when they have to be a mother or father themselves, and now they have that responsibility? What will they emulate? What's the model that they're going? That's, I think, the most obvious, in some ways, the easiest and the hardest at the same time, is to be on fire ourselves, is to be overflowing and contagious and infectious with that tefillah ourselves. When they see us, children tend to imitate their parents. They want to imitate their parents, and they'll imitate what they see in that. But I think going back to the first question, I have 6 daughters and a son. My wife is much better positioned to answer this for my 6 daughters. She has bore the responsibility of being, and she is an outstanding role model for them. My son is 9, and he started to now come to shul with me. First of all, I try to make it personal for him. The same thing we were answering to the first question. Let's think about the people who need our tefillos. We're coming, we're talking to Hashem. I'll be so proud of you if you get through the words. I'll be even prouder if you close your eyes and you talk to him. Talk to them about school and your friends. Talk to them about the people we're davening for in life and our family, friends who are not well and who need a refuah shlema. Give our children permission for it to be personal. Teach them that davening to do well in school or to be socially sound with their friends or to get along with their parents is not a poor use of davening. That is what davening was designed for. Give them that permission, give them that language, give them that platform for it. And I think when they're young, again, my son is 9, I can just speak from experience the last 2 days, is to try to keep pointing to something exciting is coming up. Shofar's coming up. Aleinu, we're going to bow down, is coming up. I'm going to put my talis over both of us. Birchas Kohanim is coming up. When they're young, to make it fun, to make it interactive, to make it something. Who says, particularly, again, there are different opinions and shittas when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, but it should be a happy day of chedva. Oh, it's a joyous day. You don't have to come and be miserable. Fun, it's exciting. The next point, the next milestone in the davening, in kitzvah, the next exciting niggin that we're going to sing and that we're going to lose ourselves in. So I think when we give our children permission to realize that the highest tefillah are not just the words on the page, which we will be incredibly proud if they say and get through, but also make a list, write down. What an incredible exercise to write down the things you're going to daven for and to stick that card in your machzor. This year, I made a card with all of our family's names, my parents, my in-laws, my wife, myself, my children, my grandchildren, all of our names with our mother's name. And I made a copy for each of my children. I put it in each of their machzorim. And in the machzor, they had, when their mind wandered or in their own amida, or when they wanted to, we're real people with real names. Baruch Hashem, B'li Ayin Hara. We don't have to be part of a regular tefillah of the regular Misha Berachs people make, but that there's a lot to daven for. And the names of the cholim, and the names of the people we know who are looking for shidduchim, the names of people, make it real for children as much as the child inside us craves that same thing that they want. So I think that we have to be the best role models we can. We have to be the best surah of a person who's in the avodah shebalev, who's taken this avodah seriously, because what they see in us is what they're going to emulate. That's going to be their depiction of davening.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Goldberg. Rabbi Weinberger.
Just to follow up with what Rav Goldberg was saying, David Melech said, "Vani tefillah." I am tefillah. I am davening. And what does that mean? I am davening. Vani tefillah. And Reb Tzaddik and other tzaddikim say that if you have a person that is coming to your door and asking for something to explain what is it that he needs and to talk to you and you listen and respond, but then you have another person that his very existence is tefillah. If somebody comes and he's starving and he's falling, so David Melech said, "Vani tefillah," my whole existence is davening. See, I grew up in a home where my mother, she should be well, my mother's davening didn't start in shul. She very rarely went to shul. In the old days, most of the women that I knew growing up, they went for Yizkor or for Kol Nidre. They didn't go to shul on a regular basis. But my mother, she should be well, and even now, my mother, her entire existence is Vani Tefillah. She lives in a continuous dialogue with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is really what Rabbi Efrem was talking about, or Goldberg was talking about, that if davening is something which begins, if a connection with Hashem is something which begins when you walk into the four walls of that institution, then it's very hard to get it started in that place. There's a certain coldness and a distance that comes with any institution, any building. I grew up in a home where Hashem was a living, breathing organism. The main lessons of tefillah were watching my mother crying by lighting candles. The connection was a very personal connection of my mother, hearing my mother saying, whether it was in Hungarian or in Yiddish, hearing my mother saying, Rebbeinu Shalom, it was such a hard day. Could you help with this? And my mother speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Mamalash and in such a way. And to me, going to shul was sort of taking that personal experience that I saw growing up and going into that place of Kedusha with that sense of Hashem being ever present, with Hashem being there every moment of my life. And I think that the children are, like Rabbi Goldberg was saying, the children are watching us. They at the end of the day, davening is something which which depends upon one's connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I get calls all the time from different Rabbanim from all over the place about discussing tefillah and having a Yom Iyun on the subject of tefillah or different themes in tefillah. And my response to all of these wonderful people, these Talmidei Chacham, in these conversations is that davening begins with emunah, begins with dvekus b'Hashem. It begins with having a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And our children can tell from a very early time in their lives, from the beginning of their lives, they are able to smell whether their mom and dad, whether their parents have a relationship with Hashem, whether their parents are living in a dialogue with Hashem, not just they walk into a building and they have a shachris, a mincha ma'ariv, a Shabbos, a yontiv, whether my mother, my father are living with Hashem every moment of their lives. And that the culmination of that, like Rabbi Levi talks about in Kuzari, the fruit, the nekuda pnimis in the life of the chassid, of the righteous Jew, is being able to pour his heart out, shachris, mincha ma'ariv. But dvekus b'Hashem, emunah b'Hashem, means tzoma nafshi lekel chai, that the Baruch Shalom is alive in our home. The Baruch Shalom is alive in every single moment of our existence, and when the children feel that the parents have this connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu, it doesn't make that much of a difference whether they're inspired in the context of, especially at a young age, of what's happening with the Bal Tefillah at that moment or in shul. It's that feeling of Beis Elokim Nahalach Baragish, that this is a place of Elokus. This is a continuation of the relationship that my parents have, and that I've grown up with in my house, in my life. It's just a formalization of something that I feel very naturally as part of my life.
Thank you, Rav Weinberger. Rabbi Hauer?
I would almost just sit and prefer to absorb. I'll add two small things. I saw once, there's a sefer called Ladas Boretz Darkecha. I don't know if the others have seen it. It's a sefer which was written by a Talmud of Rav Wolbe. The subtitle is Pirkei Hadrocha Lebalei Tshuva, chapters of guidance to people who have done tshuva. But I never did tshuva. I still found it extremely, extremely helpful. And one of the things that he writes there is something which, when I read it, it was like holding up a mirror. Holding up a mirror was such a helpful mirror. He wrote there, and I assume it's from Rav Wolbe's observation, not from the author himself, that he said that over the years, he's conducted an informal observation, and he sees two kinds of parents that come with their children to shul. He says one parent comes to shul, and he makes sure that the child has the sitter, and he makes sure that he's on the right page. And then when it comes time to say Yehei Shmei Rabbah, he looks over at the child, and together they say Yehei Shmei Rabbah. And then, a little bit later, he makes sure that he's in the right spot, and so on and so forth. That parent also, when he's learning with the child at the Avos Ubanim or whatever it is, he's always making sure that the child is there in the right place doing the right thing. It says the other parent comes into shul and sits down and starts to daven. And his child is sitting in front of him, and he's looking here and he's looking there. The parent, frankly, doesn't even notice, doesn't appear to notice. He's just davening. He's saying Psukkah de Zimra. And when he's learning together with his child, he's never making sure the child has his finger on the place. He's just learning those Mishnayos, like he's enjoying the Mishnayos. And he says, I've observed this, the author says, maybe it's Rav Wolbe, maybe it's a student, I've observed this for years. And then I watch what's happening 6 years later. 6 years later, the child who the father was pointing to the place and making sure they were saying the right thing, the child isn't even in shul. And the child who the father paid no attention to and was just davening, that child is there just davening. So I can't speak to the formality of how clean the data is on that study. But to me, it was very enlightening, and I found it personally very valuable in raising my own children. And it points as well, and to me, what I felt as well was that there's another piece to it, which is another thing, which is extremely, extremely transparent to our children. Both Rav Weinberger, Rav Goldberg spoke about how our children can tell, when our davening is genuine, when it's part of the fabric of our existence, and will follow that model. They also can tell when we're trying to help them and when we're trying to be able to be proud of them. Many times we bring our children to shul and our concern for how they're doing is because of how it reflects on us, rather than wanting to make sure that they, for their sake, for their future, for their developing relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom, that they have the best possible experience. I want to make sure, and this is especially true, for us who are in the rabbinic field and we're under the looking glass, and our kids get to share that, that position. It's kind of embarrassing if your child isn't davening well, or is all over the place. And our biggest goal when we bring our children to shul is for them. It's not for us. And how that defines when we bring them, for how long we bring them. It's so important. It's so important as the setting for that decision. At those decisions. The second point I would want to share is, we've been speaking here about davening when you're walking down the street, davening when you're home, and then the davening in shul. There's a very particular value to davening in shul, and it's on display. Baruch Hashem, I would say, Baruch Hashem, unhesitatingly. I think even more and more in many of our Batei Knesses, and that is that a shul is a mokom rina. It's a very interesting thing. If we ask people, why should you daven in shul? So people naturally say the second reason, which is given in the Gemara and Brachas, which is because Hashem is there. You go to where Hashem is, and you have proximity. You can whisper in his ear, as opposed to he's not necessarily in your house. The Gemara says that as the second reason. The first reason the Gemara says is because it's the mokom rina. In shul is the place of song, and Rashi gives there a beautiful explanation. You sing alone, you might have the most beautiful voice in the world, but when people join together and there's a ni'imus kol orev, of many voices joined together, it's a whole different story. Kids who grow up going to shul and learning how to sing the davening, who get to like the tunes. Again, that'll only happen, of course, if the parent is modeling it, if the parent is reading a sefer or a book during the piyutim. But if we're getting into it, my favorite sounds of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are those 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds whose voices, with their specific tone, come out in the crowd, and you hear them singing V'chol Maminim. And that becomes, like Rabbi Glasser, like you learned Ne'ilah, that becomes their thing. And when davening is beautiful in shul, and you get a note or a message from somebody after, at the Suda, we were just going over this niggin and that niggin, we were singing it together. That's the win. That's the win. That's infecting children with the love of tefillah.
Thank you so much.
Can I just
yeah.
I just mentioned, because Rabbi Hauer, I think it's so important it's very inspiring, the notion of creating positive associations with children. And many have negative about being yelled at or scolded of what time they got there, or that they weren't focused, or how many bathroom breaks they took, or that they weren't paying attention, their finger wasn't on the place. Just this yontif, there was a woman who had a peculiar seating request. And when I asked why she wanted to be there, it had to do with trauma of her youth, of feeling judged by the whole family of what time she got to shul. And she's an adult and a mother, and years later, her association with Rosh Hashanah and her seating request is still connected, not to positive memories, but to a negative association of the trauma of being scolded. And all the examples you gave, and I would love to hear more of the positive associations that we can create, because when our children are young, we're molding into who they will be as daveners of tomorrow.
Can I add one thing to this? Because what Rabbi Hauer was saying was so sweet and beautiful. I also have, Hashem, 6 daughters and a son. And my wife is the daughter of a very famous chazan, a teacher of chazanim, considered to be the biggest expert of chazanis probably in the world. My father-in-law, you should be well. And all of my girls know the nusach of Yom Neroim inside out. They can mimic, and not that they're just mimicking. At any point during the year, if I drop like a note from, we've had the same Baal Tefillah, a dear friend of mine, Rabbi Shul Kurland, has been the same Baal Tefillah now for close to 30 years. And every knech, every krechts, every tear, every aliyah, and you read in the nigun, and the nusach has become mamish woven into the fabric of my children's lives. And not only that, but the kids in the shul grew up with that. I made a point, because we had the fortune of having this tzaddik and Talmud Chacham as our Baal Tefillah, not to switch around Baal Tefillah every year and have them. The children from the shul, wherever they go in the world, I always get these messages. I got already a whole bunch today from kids that are all over in yeshivas, not just all different places. That Rebbe, it was beautiful, but we miss being home. Those associations that Rav Hauer was talking about, that the children have with davening, and it shouldn't only be Yom Neroim, but obviously it's strongest by Yom Neroim. Those carry them through life. That's what gives them their neshama in their davening throughout their lives. There's no question.
Beautiful, beautiful. Two of the themes that have come up over the course of the last reflections that we just had relate to nigunim and also relate to the concept of tzibur. So I wanted to first just explore certainly in the last number of years, it has become so much more prevalent and so much more popular to saturate more and more of the tefillah with nigunim. And I'm wondering whether or not those that are with us today feel that this is overall a very positive evolution, whether or not it's coming at the cost of some of the nusach tefillah, if that's something that should be of concern or of significance, whether or not the types of nigunim that are chosen is also something that should be thought about, and whether or not any and all types of singing is appropriate at any moment in the tefillah, in the davening, to just reflect a little bit on where the contemporary experience of tefillah is, specifically as it relates to nigunim, because it was so inspiring the way everyone spoke about how nigun was one of the, points of connection that kind of, really instill within a person a real sense of connection to the overall experience. So if you could just reflect a little bit on this aspect of our davening that has certainly become a very, very central part of our tefillah experience. Rabbi Hauer, you want to start us off?
Thank you. I of course, proper nigunim have to be chosen. There's such a thing as the right tune for Nesana Tekef and the wrong tune for Nesana Tekef, and you want the nigun to match. And I'm a very traditional person in the sense of significant preservation of nusach tefillah is valuable. But I think the addition, the elevation of tefillah of nigun in our davening is very, very positive, very, very helpful, because it adds to the beauty, it adds to the eagerness of it. If I can, I will share a story and a thought. The story is that when I first became a Rav, I saw my Rebbe, Zechron Livracha, Rav Yaakov Weinberg, on Tzom Gedalia. Exactly. Okay, so it's 28 years ago, I guess, today, or 29, something like that. 20 years ago, so he said, he said, Rav Moshe, how was Rosh Hashanah? How was it? So I said, it was beautiful. So he pushed a little bit more. So I said, we did something. I hope it's okay. I said, like the piyutim, like V'chol Maminim, for example, instead of saying 2 lines and then singing it and then stop and say it and sing it, so we sang it straight. And he looked at me and he said, Rav Moshe, if I could institute that here in the yeshiva, I would. And people who knew Rabbi Weinberg, he was not a Kumsitz person. He was not that. But to me, it was incredibly affirmative, and of a path which I tried to develop further. That tefillah should be nigun should be a hallmark of tefillah, and it makes it something which you don't have to be an intense person to experience the beauty of it. And I think it's a big addition for all the reasons we've said. The additional thought I would say is the following, and that is, everyone I know on the planet struggles with kavanah, with focus. It's hard to daven. It's hard to focus on our tefillah. We start saying the words, we mean well, we get in the zone, but quickly our minds wander. You know what one of the best ways to focus on something is? When you sing a heartzig nigun, when you sing a heartfelt tune, people get less distracted. You can sing on Simchas Torah, Teres Hashem Tamima, 400 times in a row, with elevated focus about the beauty of the Torah. You can sing Yerushalayim Ircha Achinu Kol Beis Yisrael, and singing helps kavanah in this world where we are grasping and struggling. How can I help myself focus? We have a fantastic tool, nigun. It's a fantastic tool.
Thank you, Rabbi Weinberger.
I don't think I could. If I start with this, then we're gonna run into Yom Kippur. I'm not quite sure where to begin.
The tinus is over.
The tinus is over in a couple of hours. Look, I'll just say this, that when we started Eish Kodesh, Mr. Shem's going to be Parshas Vayetz, will be 30 years ago. When we started, so at the time, it was considered to be very, very, very revolutionary to bring Chaim David, my friend Chaim David, in from Eretz Yisrael, and then later on, Shlomo Katz, the holy brothers Shlomo and Eitan, and then every year we bring in for the Hilul of the Eish Kodesh, we bring in Yosef Karduner, and I remember in those early years, along with other things that gave cause for concern among the more conventional chaver, they should all be well, was the musical obsession of Eish Kodesh. The shul's named after Tzaddik Pizetzner, who was himself a virtuoso, a violinist, and wrote absolutely astonishing nigunim that survived the war. And all of Chassidus, as you know, is deeply tied into nigun. Try to think of how many nigunim you know from before the time of the Baal Shem Tov. There are very few that we know among Ashkenazi Jewry. I'm not talking about Sephardim, but Ashkenazi, there are very few that we know from before the time of the Baal Shem Tov. Very few. Nusach we have, but nigunim very few that we could remember. At that time, it was the object of mockery and scorn by many other fine shuls and fine rabbanim. And Baruch Hashem, I could say this, that now everywhere I turn, I see that this is being, I don't want to use the word imitated, it sounds trite. I don't want to talk that way, but I see that it's become very, very much in demand, that as we get closer to Mashiach, so kind of David HaMelech is Ne'im Zmiris Yisrael, is the Batchana de Malka. The Beis HaMikdash was the Levium that was singing the Beis HaMikdash. All of the tefillahs, all of the tshuva. There's too much to talk about. When a Jew would come, we have a Kabbalah from the Abder Rav Susi, when a Jew would come and he was crying over his Averas. So he came to bring a carbon. So the Levium, the coin that was over there that would make a simon to the Levim, and they would play a niggin, a hartzig, a niggin of his iris. And this poor Tzarach and Yid would cry over the carbon, until finally, he'd be Samech Yadav, and then the simon would be given by the Kohen to the Levim to play a niggin shel simcha, and all of a sudden he would break out into a niggin of simcha, and this Yid and the Kohen would dance together. The world is naginas by the Heichel Tshuva, the Heichel naginas. They're next to each other. It's the same Beis HaMedrash, the Beis HaMedrash of Tshuva, the Beis HaMedrash of tefillah, the Beis HaMedrash of nagina. So I've had this discussion. I mentioned my father-in-law's Al-Gazon before. So he's very annoyed when he comes to Eish Kodesh. Baruch Hashem, we're able to have him. We switch off with the rest of the family to have my father-in-law every month for a Shabbos. And I'm always worried about what's going to happen during the Chadaydi and my Shver, because he's nusach. And I always have the same conversation as I'm wheeling him home. And I say, but Shver, but you see, these Jews are they're happy. They're enjoying the davening. It brings them to life. And so he always says something like that. That's but the nusach. So look, I have my limitations. I don't have any musical accompaniment. There's no, even when I'm not talking about Shabbos and Yom Tov, but I don't have any of that in the shul. And I insist always that we stay with the nusach of davening, because as Rabbi Hauer said, I am from the old school. I'm very traditional, and I believe that the nusach is kodesh kadoshim. However, the room for ingenuity, for creativity, with holy nigunim that, as Rabbi Hauer said, are consistent with the words that we're saying, with the mood that we're trying to create, then the niggin is the kanfei nisharim. Those are the eagle's wings. Those are the wings of David HaMelech. That without a niggin's l'parcha la'ela. Our words are grounded. The Baal Shem HaKadosh once came. He was brought to a certain shul, and it was a huge, beautiful shul. And it was far away from where he lived, and he was brought to that shul, and they opened the doors to welcome him into Baal Shem Tov, and there was nobody in the shul. It was whatever, Ben Ha-Tfilas, and the Baal Shem Tov said that I can't. I'm sorry, I can't go here. It's too crowded, and they didn't understand what he was talking about. There wasn't a soul. There wasn't a person in the shul. The Baal Shem HaKadosh said, I can't go in because these tefillas, when they never ascended, there's no song, there's no feeling, there's no emotion. They're wonderful Jews, but the tefillas lo parchu la'ela, they don't have those wings of David HaMelech to ascend, to soar to the highest place. A nigunim are the wings that take our tefillas to the highest place, and we see that. We see that those places that Rav Hauer's Rosh Hashiva, Rav Weinberger, that we see that. I remember my Rebbe is Rav David Lifshitz, I don't know if you heard the Suvalke Rav. That was my Rebbe. They're very close to my Masada Kedushin. And by Rav David, he described to us, he remembered when Rav Meir Shapir from Lublin, when Rav Meir Shapir was a big Balmanagin and a huge Talmud Chacham, when Rav Meir Shapir came to Grodno. And my Rebbe was crying when he told this over to the guys, that Reb Meir Shapiro came to Grodno, and Reb Shimon Shkop, there was a Friday night, there was an Einig Shabbos, that's what they call it over there, we call it a Fabrengen or a Tish, and there was a Tish, there was an Einig Shabbos, that Reb Meir Shapiro came there, and my Rebbe told us that Reb Shimon Shkop was there. It was until 4:30 in the morning that Reb David and the other Bachim was sitting there with Reb Meir Shapiro, and Reb Shimon Shkop was the whole time crying. And he wanted more than anything, like Rav Weinberg many years later, how do we bring this how do we bring this ruach into our davening, into our lives? So this is something which is from the beginning, from the very beginning. And it's the light of Mashiach. And as we get closer to Mashiach, the music is growing stronger and stronger and stronger. We have to be careful. It should be holy music. I'm not going into that because there's a lot of what's so-called nagina that's just a very poor imitation of what's out in the street and what we hear pounding on the, coming from the cars that are, pulling up at the red light together with us. It's not nagina, but real nagina. You heard the Rabbi Glass said that's what you grew up with. Nagina, tefillah, nusach, it's all coming together. And Mashiach is going to teach us that big niggin of Ein Od Milvado.
Thank you, Rabbi Weinberger. Rabbi Goldberg, your shul, I'm sure, has people who would love the Eish Kodesh environment and approach, and I'm sure also a few people that are struggling to one day get to the level that they can fully appreciate Nagina. So I'm sure you're balancing different constituencies, and we all know that you make all of them happy all of the time.
Of course, all the time, 100% of the time.
Yeah, that's our understanding. So take us, Rabbi Goldberg, a little behind the bima of BRS and help us understand how music and Nagina manifests itself in a shul like yours, in an experience like yours.
I appreciate it, and I'll be brief in adding, because I don't feel as strongly. I only feel strongly about the point that you're making, which is the notion of the diversity of the different things work for different people. First of all, of course, Nusach is Kodesh HaKadoshim. I agree. I remember a fight almost broke out a few years ago. A chazan sang L'kel Orach Din to a niggin, and it was like almost a riot. So the Nusach, there are parts of davening that should be Kodesh HaKadoshim. There are parts that there is leeway and room for creativity. I also it skipped me, but I come from a family of chazanim. My great uncles, the Nolman brothers. Macy Nolman was the founder of the Bell School. His brother, my great uncle, Rav Louis Nolman, once was davening somewhere where somebody used the wrong Kaddish before an Amidah at Mincha and Yontif, and he therefore davened the wrong Shemona Esrei. He wanted to take the person to a Din Torah. He wanted to take him to a Beis, to a Din Torah, because they used the wrong Nusach, and it threw him off. So I also come from that place of Nusach and the role of Nusach and the significance of Nusach. And I also personally, if I could fly every Shabbos to Ish, I would daven at Ish Kodesh with Rav Weinberger. It touches me very deeply. I understand it. I love it. I believe in it. The only difference that I would say is that people have a different shorish neshama. Not everybody is drawn or attracted to the same thing in the same style. And there are people who daven at different paces and daven in different style. And so some people, chazanas and nusach, it's what moves them. It's what elevates them. It's what takes them to that place that Rebbe was just describing. Whereas for other people, it would be a form of torture. But people are designed differently. So, we have, Baruch Hashem, many minyanim over Yom Noraim. We have many minyanim all year long. And that's part of that reason, is to say that there are many shvatim, and there's a shara kolel for a person who doesn't conform to any particular shevet. And what we try to create is a place that we don't make people conform or squeeze or have to fit in to one style. But, part of last night for me was the feedback from each of the minyanim, this year. Okay, what did everyone think? How did it go? We're still coming out of, as all of us are, we're still coming out of Corona, where we had 400 minyanim in tents and masks. And I was reminiscing the mask on the end of the shofar. It's hard to even believe that but we're still coming out of that now, and we're still realigning and reconfiguring, and who's in which room and which minyan, which chazanim, and who came back and who stayed. So as we're doing that, we have to remember, and I think that's part of the avod, is to just because something works for me doesn't mean it has to work for everybody. What shouldn't work for anyone is being disconnected. What shouldn't work, and we shouldn't be tolerant, or we shouldn't want to accept, is the person who says davening b'chlal doesn't do anything for me. But a person who says, I find meaning and purpose, I'm elevated and enriched, but it's a different style. I'm nusach and chazanas all the way. I'm nigunim all the way. I'm this all the way. As long as it's genuine, it's real, as long as it's tachanunim. So I think we should make that space for people to find what works for them and not sit. There's a lot of people come out with pride in their minyan, and then a lot of judgment about the minyan they didn't go to, the way they did it over there. We should make that space and let people, as long as we have what to work on. And I think if we make that space and people can find what works for them, as long as it's an elevating practice.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Goldberg. I think we're going to conclude with one question that kind of maybe even combines two, and ask for everyone's insight and everyone's reflection. And that is that, we're all gathered here. It's really kind of the culmination of the momentum that was driven by the larger efforts of the Himatzo program and everything that's going on in the Jewish community, for us to try to reach higher in our ruchnius and our spirituality and our connection with the Ribono Shel Olam. And there's no question that those that have taken time on a work day, which is, there are few and far between this year in terms of the calendar, and especially on a fast day, everyone's a little more tired without the coffee, to be able to reflect and to be able to connect and strive to grow in our tefillah. This is the period of time where we're working on it. But we also know, as we go through this period of time, that there's a Simchas Torah that Rabbi Hauer referred to, where we will dance and dance and dance, and that Simchas Torah will ultimately conclude with a Ma'ariv. And after that Ma'ariv, we will, I don't want to say return to life as before, but we will continue with the Magil Hashana, with the year's momentum, without these contexts that energize us and uplift us. And one of the things we're all thinking about is how could we grow within this period of time, in particular as it relates to tefillah, in a manner that will help us propel that growth beyond this period of time? How could these changes and evolutions become something that are internalized in a manner that they're lasting, that they endure? And maybe in reflecting on that, if there's a particular tefillah experience that maybe you had in your life that itself made an impression, itself a tefillah experience, maybe you were looking for it, maybe it just happened because of circumstance, but it's something that stands out as a transcendent moment of connection that you had with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the context of tefillah, but more so than just something that just kind of lives in nostalgia or like remember when that happened. It was something transformative. It was something that changed and shifted your approach, your attitude, your disposition towards tefillah, and it echoes even in the way in which you approach tefillah today. How do we harness these experiences of elevated spirituality in a way that they can be internalized so that they become part of who we are and we can take them with us? Let's not wait for Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah to discuss how to take it with us, as we're doing it right now. What could we be doing to make sure that this is part of our avoda, this is part of our growth in a way that is lasting? Rabbi Weinberger, we'll start with you.
So I'm just going to go back for a minute to the beginning, really what my friend Rabbi Efrem Goldberg was talking about. He didn't use the word, but I will use the word that what he was talking about is his bodidus. And his bodidus is something which is not something. It's not something Rabbi Nachman from Breslov discovered. His bodidus. There's a whole parak called Parak His bodidus at the end of the Sefer Hamaspik La'ovdei Hashem from Rabbi Avram ben Harambam. And the Rambam talks about himself in the third chelik of Mar Nevuchim, the Parak Nun Aleph. The Rambam talks about the life of the Mizbodei, and his bodidus, in my opinion, it's not in my opinion, from what I understand, learning from the Reishis Chachma, from the Chavetz Chaim, from the Sefer Charedim, from the Arizal, from Rabbi Chaim Vital, from the Klei Yaakov, from many tzaddikim long before Rabbi Nachman, that again, going back to what Rav Goldberg was saying at the beginning, is that I believe that the only way to carry this behimotzo into the rest of the year is through that belief that Hashem is not confined to a particular time, to a particular building, or particular words in the Siddur. Davening began long before there was such a thing as formalized tefillah, and by understanding, by learning what his bodidus is, and actually becoming a part of their world. Besides that, we have a chabura on the whole subject of his bodidus. We've done in the past, and hopefully we're going to be doing shortly after Yom Tovim, to take a trip to a quiet place with Chevra, and to go to a scenic, nice place, and I write to spread out. And having learned a little bit the seder of his bodidus and how to begin to connect to his bodidus, that behimotzo is not just aseres meitshuva. The behimotzo is something where davening becomes tefillah lekel chayai. It becomes something that I'm excited about, that I look forward to. That's something that's very much a part of my life. Tefillah means to be bound. Naftuli elokim naftalti, and all these klayok that's what I'm talking about. It means to be attached. It means to bound, like a psil, to be wound together, to be bound together. But if a person waits, again, coming back to what Rav Goldberg said at the beginning, if a person just has those times of the day, or the time, or the time, or times of the week when he goes to shul daven, then it's not going to. It usually doesn't carry over well into. It doesn't translate well into his day-to-day life. So im ta'iru v'im ta'iru es ahav ashet techpat. how to make this time of the year into a chayfetz, into something real. Learn the art, study the art. It's not the time to do this. I can give you many Mara Makaimis and many Svarim books, Hebrew, English, French, Russian, Yiddish, whatever you like, Spanish, to read guided manuals, help how to develop this day by day dialogue with Hashem Yisbarach. And it is a dialogue. It's two ways. I'm not going to explain that now, but to speak to him and to hear from him, not a baskol or nevuah, but in the way that Hashem speaks to us, how to have this constant, to live in a relationship with Hashem Yisbarach, with the davening of Yom Niraim, is a portal that brings us into something much higher. To make into something which is real, into a chayfetz. Of course, on a very practical level, somebody was just telling me yesterday, one of my children I was very proud of him was telling me is that, he decided last year that from now, this entire year, he's going to bench inside. And he's going to say Kriya Shema Elamita inside, not by heart, half asleep or rushing through. And he Baruch Hashem, he was very proud because we were talking around the table about what did you accomplish, what do you feel you accomplished this year, and I was very proud of him, even though he's a father of children already, and he's already a grown man. But I was very proud because he carried it through the entire year. And I said Kol HaKavod, because you took something out of Rosh Hashanah Kippur in tefillah, in davening, in brachas, in that dusiach with Hashem, and you made it to something which is l'maisa. You accepted it upon yourself, and you lived with it. In response to the question, I'm already going too long, I'm sorry, because I know it's late, but in response to the question of that transformative or transforming experience of tefillah, what I'm going to tell you now probably is not going to resonate with a lot of people, and I apologize in advance, because maybe it's not going to be understood as a positive thing, but it definitely, I live with it every moment of my life, and every day I go back to it. My parents, my mother Shishba, my father, Holocaust survivors. They were in concentration camp, and when I was 13 years old, we lived in Eretz Yisrael. We went on Aliyah, and usually we davened in a shtibel. We lived in Netanya, where there were a lot of Hungarian survivors, and that's where we lived. And we usually davened in a shtibel, but there was a certain chazan that was coming to town, and my father wanted to daven Yom Kippur in the big shul in Netanya. I don't remember the name of the chazan. I just remember that he was a gingy with long red beard and had a booming voice, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. That's all I remember, just to get out. And my father and like the other, the survivors, they were the old Jews. They were just like mamish, living with this chazan. It was unbelievable to watch. I enjoyed watching my father, but I wasn't enjoying the davening because that's just not my thing. I get it. It's great, but it's not my thing. So like Rav Goldberg was saying, everybody has their thing. That wasn't my thing. So it came time for Yizkor, and I left shul. And I was standing outside. There was a little garden by the big shul in Netanya, and I was standing outside with some of the kids. And this is 1970. So it's not so long after the war, and it was very soon after the 6-Day War. And the chazan began Yizkor, and it unleashed a torrential cry, a screaming and crying. Every single person there that was left for Yizkor, it was still fresh in their memories and their minds what happened and who they lost, either in the Holocaust or in the 6-Day War or 48, whatever it was. But it was something. I ran away. I just started to run away from it. But ever since then, I've been running towards it. And it's not because of the Holocaust or of the 6-Day War or the War of Independence. It's because of the sense that I got, that I felt that here we have a Beis HaMedrash, a huge shul filled with Jews who had every reason in the world not to come, to just turn away, to walk away. But they wanted to cry out to Hashem with that feeling that they had, with that loss, with that memory. They wanted to connect to Hashem. They wanted to yell, to cry, to complain, to beg, whatever they wanted to do. But it's we're not leaving you. We're staying with you. I think that changed my whole life. I know it sounds like a little bit scary and negative, but it's not. It's being there with Hashem because you're the one to turn to. Eshpach lefanav sichi.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Weinberger. Rabbi Goldberg?
So I think one of the things that we can do is a relationship. All relationships in life have the danger and risk of growing stale. The Torah instituted Taras Mishpacha. The Gemara and Nida gives the reason in order to create a freshness and a newness and a hischadshus. Relationships need that. I recently saw that when the Pnei Menachem passed away and the Ger Rebbe was nifter, they found 200 Sidurim. That certainly he used all the different Mefarshim on the Siddur were enhancing his davening. He had the 200 Sidurim because of the commentators in them, but he also had them because he was rotating his Sidurim. And to get to the number 200, that's pretty frequently rotating a new Siddur. Something can grow old, it can get stale, it can get rote, and making something new as simple as a new Siddur. We get used to where we think we're going to see something on a page, and is it large or is it small font? And just getting a new Siddur can create a new excitement and a new relationship with the text of that Siddur. And I think one thing that we can take out of this is a promise and a pledge to not let it go old, that if it starts to feel stale, to introduce something new, to open a sefer. People forget the Siddur is also a sefer. They say, what are you learning? I'm learning Mishnah, I'm learning Gemara, I'm learning Halach, I'm learning Nach, I'm learning Machshava, Musa Chasidus. The Siddur is also a sefer. You're allowed to learn the Siddur as a sefer. And it shouldn't just be a limud. It's a limud amanas to daven differently, but we should make a pledge, bihi matzo, when we feel this moment of connection and passion and romance, to make a promise and a pledge that we won't let it go stale. We'll get a new Siddur before it can become. I want to follow up on what Mori Varabi said, and so much, everything I'm sharing now, I learned from a Weinberger, including that in Elul, we did his this trip to the beach. We've done it now every year. Take a chevra, we learn a piece from Nachman, we spread out along the beach at night. People said it changed their life. All of it I owe to you, Rebbe. I learned from you. But maybe there's also a step between the person who's not ready yet for his bodhidus. It's hard. It's very hard. It's hard. 60 seconds of his bodhidus could feel like 3 hours. You're like, is it over? Even I was leading this at the beach. I was looking around. Can I go yet? Are they done? I'm done. I had to stay till others were done. It's hard. It's very hard. But there's a step in between just davening from the Siddur and Reb Nachman's writings to spend an hour a day in his bodhidus. And that is, the Gemara says, Halavai sheyispal kol yom kulo. Halavai, a person would be in tefillah the whole day. So what does that mean? You can't be in shul all day. You got to go to work. You got to take care of your kids. You got responsibilities. You have personal needs. You can't be in shul all day. How could you be mispal kol yom kulo? I don't remember where I saw it, but I think it's so true, and I think it should inform and inspire every day of our life. Our whole day should be an ongoing tefillah. Not necessarily even just hisbodedus, halavai hisbodedus, but meaning you're driving carpool, let it go smoothly, let them have green lights, let there not be an accident, let the kid put on the seatbelt, let it pick up every kid. You're walking into the boardroom or the operating room, or you're walking into the negotiating room, wherever you're going in life, a little tefillah before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I know before we came on there, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, give me something intelligent to say. Can't believe you got me on this panel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please let me say something intelligent. Afterwards, Hashem, that went smoothly. The technology, there's a storm going on around. It didn't cut out. Halavai sheyispal kol yom kulo. The smallest, littlest. That's how when you get into the shul and open the siddur, you're already in the middle of the conversation. Rav Weinberger described that his mother's always having, that yispal kol yom kulo. There are countless things in our lives that only when they stop do we realize how much we took it for granted. Offer a tiny 2-second tefillah before, a 2-second odah after, but the whole day then is a conversation. Let this go smoothly. That's what tefillah saderech is before you take off. Why can't it also be every car ride? Let us get there safe and sound. Why can't it be every business conversation? Let me say the right things. Let me negotiate correctly. Let me come to the right conclusion. Halavai. So David HaMelech, we're saying now to David. The Slonim Rebbe Zatzal says that's Shivte Bevis Hashem Kol Yimei Chayai. It's a yeshua. David HaMelech was a king. He had to go to battle. He had to govern a people. He had responsibilities. How could he have asked, I want to sit in the house of Hashem all day? So Slonim says, no, it means that wherever I am, I turned it into the house of Hashem. I'm in a tefillah wherever I go. Wherever I go, I'm offering a tefillah before I go in, that it goes smoothly, that it work, that it be Kodesh Baruch Hu, that it be the right thing. So I think that the best thing is to be in that conversation, is to be working on that amun, that dvekas, that bitachon, to be doing all the work outside the shul. So when you get inside the shul, when you open that siddur, do all the work outside the siddur. When you open the siddur, it'll flow more freely. This may sound trite or cliche, or you won't even believe me, but I would say among my most inspiring tefillahs that I ever had were the last 2 days. Whatever's going on in our shul life, whatever's going on among dear Yedid Nefesh, dear friends, and the heartfelt tefillahs of asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for mamash, for nisim and flows. But I also, this year, I alluded to it several times, I wrote down this card, not only my family's names, but I actually contacted people. I have names of cholim that we daven for in the shul, that we print in our bulletin. But I thought of people, and I said, could you tell me your name? I want to include you in my tefillahs. First of all, this wasn't my intent, but what it did to them, that someone was thinking of them and said, "Could I have your name? I know you're looking for a shidduch. I know you're trying to have a child. I know you're going through a hard time. Could you give me your name? I want to have it in my machs. I want to be thinking about you." Instead of my mind wandering, and as I'm lost in the nigun of that piyut, I want to see those names. That card was present next to my machzor on the stender, the whole davening. And I can tell you it changed my davening. And I'm telling you that not, as the young people would say, to flex. I'm telling it because there's still time, Yom Kippur. There's still time, Kol Nidre, and Shachris, and Musaf, and Mincha, and Ne'ilah Yom Kippur. Write down names, people, English, write down their names with their mother's name, Hebrew. Look at it, let it be next to your machzor. Your machzor come alive. Let it not just be the words and turning the pages, make it personal. Think about people, understand what is at stake and what we're fighting for. Understand that tefillah is not, it's real. It has cosmic implications. And this year, everything that happened this year was the result of last year's Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Aseret Mechuva, last year's B'im Matzah Hayom Haras Olam, like a pregnancy. Everything is born in the pregnancy and the conception. The whole year comes from these 10 days and up to Yom Kippur. This is not just like rabbinic manipulation and exploitation. This is legit. This is real. We're impacting the cosmos of a year ahead that we can't even anticipate or don't even know. That we should take advantage. We should think. We should write down those names. The more personal, the more real it is, the more of an impact it will have. Not just these Aseret Mechuva. He should be Behi Matzo wherever we are, at work and at gym, in the supermarket, in our home, in the dining room, the living room, the homework room. We should send our children off to school. I'll end with this. I'm sorry, I'm going on. I had a family minhag when I was a child. My father would send us off to school, and we had a test. He would give us a raw noodle. And on our desk at school, as we took the test, was a raw noodle. And he said it was a reminder, use your noodle. Don't just try to fly through the test and turn it in, go over your question. I give my kids a raw noodle. They have a test. I give them it's my Masorah, my father. But you don't just give the raw noodle. You give the noodle and you say, don't forget to ask Hashem to do well on your test today. It's real. Their davening now just went from, I was at davening and they were yelling, I was paying attention, my sitter was my finger on the right place, to, oh yeah, I could ask him to do well on my test. I need help doing well on my test, or the soccer game after school, or whatever it is that they care about. To make it tachanunim, to make it real and vibrant and dynamic and alive. It won't only be Behi Matzo, but he will be Behi Matzo all year long, wherever we are.
Thank you, Rabbi Goldberg. Rabbi Hauer, we're going to ask you to close out our program, and in doing so, also extend our Akaras HaTov to the OU for making, first of all, for bringing this group together in a manner that certainly, I'm sure, uplifted many of those, if not all of those who joined us this afternoon, but really for positioning tefillah at the forefront of the Orthodox Union's efforts in inspiring the community, the larger Jewish community. We invite everyone to continue to benefit from the resources that were developed under that vision, shiurim from both men and from women, shiurim that really spanned many different levels, many different contexts and different styles, and to really join us in our quest to continue growing through our tefillah. And with that, Rabbi Hauer, if you could please share your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Glasser, and thank you immensely to Weinberger and Goldberg. This has been I felt tremendous inspiration from this hour, and generally how Klal Yisrael is always trying to do better in this realm is something which inspires each and every one of us, wherever we sit. I would like, if possible, to share 3 points in closing. One is the following. Starting from leaving shul yesterday, or the first day of Rosh Hashanah, to walking home and bumping into people from other places, to phone calls with friends and family, Matzah Shabbos, to people I bumped into this morning, here in the office. You ask people, so how was davening? And the most common word that people use is beautiful. When you ask people how davening was on Rosh Hashanah, they say it was beautiful. You ask people how davening was in Yom Kippur, they say it was beautiful. Now, on a Tuesday morning in February, I would venture to say that if I stood even in the parking lot of Eish Kodesh, and I asked people on the way out, how was davening? I don't know if one person would say that davening was beautiful. They might say it was good pace. It wasn't too fast. Beautiful. And how about Shabbos? So I think that one thing that we should take from the Yom Noraim is that we should make a goal that the answer to the question, how was davening beautiful, should be more frequent. And I know that beautiful is not a deep word. It's not, it was Amida B'fnei Hashem, it's intense and so on and so forth. But I think that that's Shava L'chol Nefesh, that if tefillah was uplifting, if it was meaningful, kol chad v'chad lefum churfe, everybody according to their level, to able to say davening was beautiful. I think it's a concrete goal for us in our lives, in our Batei Knesses. Let that be a more frequent reply. One thing. The second thing, I didn't come on this call planning to say this. I don't think I've ever said it to anybody in my life. I have this chus. I daven for the Amud, the first tefillah of Yom Noraim, of Rosh Hashanah, Maariv, Rosh Hashanah, the first night. I still do it. And I before I say the first, ay for Baruch Hu, I look up and I see in front of me the white pareiches in the Aron Kodesh. And then I look down at the Siddur. That white pareiches does something. And really, it's all around you on Yom Noraim. It's the white kittles. It's people come to shul on Yom Noraim. If maybe a regular Shabbos, maybe it's not perfect, but there's an atmosphere. A Beis Knesses, a beautiful shul, is an atmosphere. The white, the additions of it's an atmosphere. And excuse me, Bifnei Rabbi, but I know that the Piazetzner writes extensively and others about the Koyach HaTziur in tefillah, picturing in davening. On Yom Noraim, we employ that. Everybody employs that. The atmosphere, the environment is such that the images that are in front of our physical eyes help. And we need to realize how valuable it is, both in the environments that we choose to daven in during the year and in the imagined things, so to speak. Not imagined is the wrong word, but the things that we picture in front of our eyes. Baruch Ata Hashem. Blessed are you, Hashem. Picture you're standing, mamash, you're speaking in the second person. We're not speaking like us Litvak is speaking the third person Tarabeim, as if they're not in front of us, as if we're speaking to somebody who's not there. We speak to the Rebbeinu Shalom in direct second person. Picture it. Rabbi Efrem, you spoke a couple of times about the card with the names, which is very meaningful. I want to tell you something which blew me away. I saw it and I melted, and I still melt when I think about it. I once picked up someone's machzer, a woman's machzer, and don't ask me how. And I opened it, and in the back cover, there was a picture of her family. And in the inside flap was a picture of her parents who were no longer Ba'al Mohadein. And the pasuk says, "Vayetar Yitzchak Lashem l'neichach ishtay." Yitzchak davened to Hashem opposite his wife. So Rashi says he was standing over here, she was standing over there. The Radak says, and he learns this in a few places in Nevi'im, that he looked at his wife who was struggling with this difficulty of being barren at this time, and he looked at her and he davened. So there's a visualization of the Rebbeinu Shalom, the white pareiches, and imagining the Rebbeinu Shalom, and then there's thinking about what you're davening about. I mean, we're worrying about the people in South Florida, which we should be, and like we can pause and picture, what is it? Hunker down and in everything that we daven for. Those pictures are beautiful. It's something which helps. And if we're teaching our children how to daven, think about, picture it in your mind, and ask for it. The last thing that I would say, and I guess it's really the closing for this discussion. There's something about working on davening. There's like nothing like it. When you're working on your davening, even a little bit, it improves your davening. And there's another thing, which is that it stops being effective as soon as you stop working. We could work a whole Aseret Tshuva, and we do, like everybody, so sometimes more, sometimes less, but we take davening way more seriously now, and it has an impact. Our davening, this is the davening that sets the bar for the whole year. But then what happens? So what separates is, that Weinberger says that they're on the books, that they're going to go after Yontiv. They already have on the schedule. They're going to be doing something. And that's what we have to do. We can't imagine we can maintain the intensity of Yomim Neiroyim for 12 months or 13 months of a year. But we can draw from it that there's a real lefum, Tsara, Agra, and I don't mean the word tsar in terms of anguish, but I mean in terms of investment. If we invest something in it, there's such a great yield. And everybody wants to get more, put more into their davening and get more out of their davening. So something, that shir and tefillah that Rabbi Weinberger has all the time, that chabura and feeling Omed B'fnei Hashem, the WhatsApp of davening that Rabbi Goldberg has, just going through the siddur. The fact that somebody, if we together could create a new normal in Klal Yisrael, and the new normal in Klal Yisrael, just like Daf Yomi is a normal in Klal Yisrael, and just like, I don't know, whatever the other normals are, it's like a normal in Klal Yisrael was that everybody spends a little bit of time each day, maybe even each week, just thinking about davening, not during davening, but separate, just think about davening, do something, work, learn something about davening, how elevating that would be.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Thank you, Rav Weinberger. Thank you, Rabbi Goldberg. Thank you, Rabbi Hauer. Thank you for the...
Thank you, Rabbi Glasser.
It was a pleasure. And we want to wish the entire community a Gemar Chasima Tova. Everyone should have a beautiful, beautiful davening.